What's up, everyone? Alex here. I am a content creator at the Backlog Battle YouTube channel and the Backlog Battle podcast YouTube channel. I have been podcasting for over 10 years, going on 12 and 13, but I also do game reviews of games that you might not have heard of, but are actually really great games on youtube.com/backlogbattle. So please go check it out. Oh, and by the way, Stormageddon has been on my Backlog Battle podcast, and you can find that at youtube.com/backlogbattlepodcast. So thanks for having me, guys. And for this episode of Side Quests, I want to talk about Persona 4 Golden, and by proxy, Persona 4. Persona 4 came into my life during a time when I had actually been away from JRPGs and Japanese games in general. I remember it clearly. The several years leading up to my discovery of Persona 4, I was playing a lot of Call of Duty, I was playing a lot of more Western games, and in a way, like, I was kind of disenchanted with what was going on in Japan at the time, because there was a real struggle to figure out how to push the different genres that they pioneered forward. And the West was having a lot of success in terms of technology and in pushing forward what video games can be. But there comes a time when you kind of need a break from that, and chasing the green fairy, so to speak, in terms of high-fidelity graphics, can be really difficult. And so I found myself feeling out of sorts, and so I started, and I don't quite remember how I discovered Persona 4, only that I had, actually no, I remember. A friend of mine, his name is Mark, he basically started talking to me about the Persona series. And at first I was like, what's Persona series? And he's like, actually not even that. The funny thing is that I've been a fan of Persona ever since Revelations Persona on the PS1, so I had known about the series. But it wasn't until my friend Mark reintroduced me to it, saying that he really enjoyed the game, that I started really looking into it. I remember finding it on Amazon and realizing that it had just come out in late 2008. And so I purchased the game alongside a lot of the other back catalog for Shin Megami Tensei, even going so far as joining Atlus's Faithful forums at the time. And that's where my love for Atlus began, pretty much. Not to say that it was ever lost, it just kind of got deferred until later in my life. But really going back to Persona 4, when I started playing the game, I felt like I was transported to a place that wasn't so far removed from reality, but despite that, it was still a place that I'd never been to. I lived in the Philippines for a good chunk of my life, in my teenage years, but I never had that experience of living in a provincial town in Asia, for that matter. Not to say that I've lived in a provincial town anywhere, but I feel that living in a provincial town in Asia is far more different. This is so apparent when you get to Inaba with the rice paddy fields, and of just living as a student, knowing the shopkeepers by their first name, the drama that's going on in their lives, which is an aspect of the game that I really loved. Not only was it set in a calendar year that spanned an entire year, every single dialogue changed depending on what was going on in the story and the characters themselves. So while, for example, the person running the model toy shop doesn't necessarily have, multiple storylines coming out of it, you still, by virtue of the gameplay having something to do with those characters, it almost kind of begged the question of, like, well, what did they do beyond this interaction, and that's where the magic of the game exposed itself to me. That Inaba as a whole felt like a living, breathing town. And because of the sheer smaller scale of it, it became a very intimate experience and really complemented the theme of the entire game. Every Persona game has had a theme, and Persona 4's theme is the search for the truth of your identity. In fact, one of the songs is literally called Reaching Out for the Truth, which is probably my favorite song in the game. And as you meet some of the characters, even though they are so far removed from who we are as people, the brilliance of the writing kind of made it seem like there were aspects of every single character that you can identify with and you can empathize with. And up until that point in JRPGs, it had been a long time since I had felt something similar. The last game that I remembered at the time that made me feel this way was Final Fantasy VI on the Super Nintendo. And mind you, it's only because I played 6 after I played Chrono Trigger. And the thing is, I really held 6 and Chrono Trigger in high regard for its excellent character development and storytelling. But there's something about Persona 4 that hit closer to home. And I think it's because of the setting and how realistic it is. Obviously, there isn't a serial killer that attacks in the fog, taking out people and stuff like that. But it's as close to real as JRPGs have gotten since Earthbound. And I think because it was so grounded in reality and the inner turmoil that each character goes through with seeking who they are, questioning their identities and stuff, it was really seminal to me as a person trying to figure out who I was as an individual. And I would suspect that this is also the reason why a lot of Persona fans still regard as Persona 4, and by proxy Persona 4 Golden, as their personal favorite. To that end, I think about Kanji's story and how he struggles with the definition of masculinity, or Naoto, who struggles with the outside perception of who they are as an individual. And while this game doesn't go further exploring these ideas, I like to interpret it as the game wanting you to come to your own conclusion, which I highly appreciate. I believe that the best pieces of media doesn't need to be overt in telling you what you want to know, and that the building blocks of an idea are presented to you, and it's your job not just to take in these ideas, but to also come to your own conclusion. And sure, many fan works have probably elaborated on what this means for these two characters and the rest of the cast, but to me, hitting so close to home, it made me think about my identity as an individual. And a part of me wanted to experiment, and I found out that I didn't care much for pronouns or the rigid definitions of the gender binary. And so I felt that I needed to find myself because I was broken at the time Persona 4 came, and that's when I started cross-dressing. And even pushing the gender boundaries way past my comfort zone. I was afraid of the people that I was about to meet, but at the end of the day, regardless of how I presented, people were genuinely nice to me. I met some of my closest friends in the trans community and even became an active participant in many forums, asking people about who I was and what I wanted to be. And ultimately turned out that I was gender fluid and I didn't care about all these things. And I owe it all to Persona 4 for making me question that. I think what's interesting about this is that compared to a lot of people, I really focus in on the storytelling and the characters and how they relate to me. And I know that a lot of people do that, but there are even more people who mostly care about the gameplay and what they can get from that experience through the minutia of the mechanics. And I do find that fascinating that video games can accommodate both. I think Persona 5 was perfect in that it straddled great gameplay and great storytelling, but in terms of heart and relatability, Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden will always win my heart. And I hope that if you haven't played it yet, that you'd consider doing so, especially how it's so available on so many other platforms now outside of the Vita, which it's just PC, but I'm hoping that we'll see it on other platforms as well. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for having me. And of course, if you're interested in my channel, please go check it out at youtube.com/backlogbattle. Until next time, happy gaming.